in the kind of tumult of the 20th century and modern life, one of the things they find very, very useful is the discipline about how you conduct your everyday life. And that everyday life is very, very prescriptive. It demands a lot from the individual in terms of what you will do ritually, what you will do socially, what is your obligation to your faith in terms of how much, what percentage of your income you will actually give to your faith. This is not a small matter. It's a very important adherent to making not only that person strong, that family strong, but by the fact that they voluntarily give these monies to the church, if you like to call it that, or to the faith, they make that administration of those, of Swaminarayan, you could call it sect or religion, far stronger than if they did not. And this is not unprecedented. There are many smaller faiths that where castes will give to the caste leader of the caste temple some amount of their money, annual income, amongst the Rabaris, who are cattle keepers of sheep and camel. There is a temple very close to Dhangadhar, about 15-20 miles in Surendnagar, where every shepherd, no matter where he goes, from Kutch all the way to Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh, will give a certain percentage of his annual income to that particular village where the Mahant lives. And then when this community has some need or they have some problems with the government as a caste, the head of this particular temple, this Mahant, he then has the voice of that particular caste to go and say the same thing, make a petition. He is essentially not somebody who's not, he's primarily a social figure, not a political figure. But in that role as a social religious figure, he has political capacity because he is functioning by the will, traditional will of the people. Now that's just one example. There are many similar caste-oriented leaders, not simply kings and other forms. Kingship, of course, as you know, lapsed in India in 1947. So for the last 60 years, there are no kings. They're political people elected to political office. But these other socio-religious authorities, they have existed at the time of the king and before, and they continue to exist now. And similarly to the Swaminarayan sect, so are these various monks of different castes. And also is the truth, for instance, of the great temples like the Dwarkadhish, Shankaracharya temples, which Shankaracharya lived in the 7th century. He was another famous reformer. So I think this is an important way to understand that in Saurashtra, which is a peninsula, and Gujarat, there are these different foci of power. Electoral power, military power may be one type of power, but then there's also the socio-religious power vested in these traditional modes. And amongst them is the place of the Swaminarayan. What's important, what's very significant about the Swaminarayan as being different from some of these others, is that they are not restricted to simply a caste. They're restricted to religion. Normally Christians or Muslims will not become Swaminarayan, but there is a big tent religion whereby they can attract people from other forms of Hindu worship to concentrate, not by abandoning what they have, but by preferring. This is very important. They don't say that that Shiva does not exist or Vishnu doesn't exist. In fact, Swaminarayan is an incarnation of Vishnu himself. But they are saying Swaminarayan is the more recent arrival, and the prescription that he is putting forth is different than others put forth. And that for this time, this period, he is the most appropriate deity. And you, if you worship him and you are ruled by the prescription that the Swamis put out of how to live your moral life, or conduct your life in a moral way, you will succeed. And I think that is what is important. Okay?
Okay. Now getting back to the conditions around 1750, 1800 in Gujarat, you said usually when there's moral corruption or instability, there's also economic instability. Can you sort of explain to me also the sort of dominant ideologies or the practices that were going on during that time, as far as like gender discrimination? Krishna gave me this word, I forget what it's called, like sanvat, or I'm sorry, sati, where it was very abusive to women, things like that. What kind of ideologies were going on and may have been rejected at the time of revivalist movements or
Well, I think that I at any one time in the Hindu world, as in any world, the prescriptions of living are always finite. You may have a prescription for a new utopian world, but that utopian world is based on the world that you know. And so the world is always changing. That's just a kind of truism, whether you like it or not. So the whole notion of caste, nothing can be more unequal than the idea that you are separate in your lifetimes, you're inferior or superior. It's premised on the notion, of course, that you are in your station in life because of your past deeds in your former life, and that you become what you have because of what you did. Nobody else made you into that, you yourself made yourself into that. That is the kind of Brahmanic vision. That's the bedrock of the caste system. Now, right from the Buddha and Jain and other reformers, they've challenged this idea of the impropriety, and they use the idea that this is used to control people, that the Brahmanic hold is such that it is used to control people and make them behave in the hierarchical norm that exists. However, it's been such a pervasive and prominent thing that despite the efforts of all these reformers, whether it's Jain or Buddha or Guru Nanak or Christ or Islam, all of them decry caste, and yet caste has continued to exist in one form or another right up to the present time. So the question here is that, of course, the people, there may be some certain kinds of practices, whether you want to call them practices of discrimination, practices of privileging, that when Swaminarayan Bhagwan was alive, he pointed out that these are mistreatment of women, if you like to call it, or labor issues, or issues about unkindness to animals, any number of issues. The point here is that these issues that he pointed out as being uncivilized or inadequate or barbaric or crude or whatever you want to call it, they found resonance with the people. And so more people were attracted to his message of saying these things are not something that we wish to uphold. And that gave him more standing, more legitimacy in it. I am not adequately familiar with what Swaminarayan Bhagwan said and challenged outright. He challenged social practices, not the religious pantheon, so far as I understand or so far as I know. He doesn't at any point say that, don't worship Hanuman or Ganapati or anything like that. So, what existed exactly and what were the points that he pointed out, saying these are the bad practices of the time, I am not adequately familiar to point out. In Gujarat, we always had the pacifist streak, the vegetarian streak, the idea of segregation, that what is good for a man may not be good for a woman. The whole notions that was resident in Jain philosophy of ahimsa,